think everybody, most people in here know me. My name is Pamela Morgan. I'm the Academic Skills Advisor for Student Support Services Program. And we have several workshops left in this semester. So if you'll notice the little yellow handout, upcoming events. And today we have the essay and research papers workshops, so we're glad you came to attend that. Please make note of all the other things that we have going on the rest of the semester. Next week, community resources, midterm workshop. East Carolina will be here on the same day, the College of Education, and I'm not going to read all of them. You can note that on your calendar. If you haven't received a calendar, you're in Student Support Services, hopefully you are. You can come by and see any of the staff, and we have new calendars in for this upcoming year, and it's about those, okay? All right, well, thank you, Mary Ann. Ms. Simmons, some of you might have had her as an instructor or have her this semester, so I'm going to turn it over to her.
All right, thank you. Well, thank you all for coming. First thing I want to ask you, we're going to cover a couple of things today. The first one we're going to start with is how to take essay exams. How many of you are nervous when you take an essay exam? That's mostly everybody in here, myself included. Okay, what makes you nervous?
Want to be able to get everything out that I want to say.
Okay. So maybe just trying to organize it. You don't know how to put it.
I have so many, a lot of ideas.
Okay.
I don't want to say one specific thing and not veer off the course and go into something else.
So sticking to what they're asking you, staying on course, making sure you say everything you want to say to answer. Okay. What else? What else concerns you about essay exams? Grammar. Okay, that doesn't matter.
But on and on.
Just going on and on. Right. Okay. Well, I gave you a handout, and it just says on the top, basic strategies for writing answers to essay questions. And I put up here, you can succeed, because even though it makes you nervous and you feel like you can't do it, you can. And there are certain things that you need to do, certain steps you need to follow if you're in class and you have an essay exam to write. Just follow these steps, and it will make it a whole lot easier. Okay. First thing is you have to really know what is being asked of you. If you don't know what they're asking, you don't know what your instructor is asking, how can you answer the question? How can you if you don't know? You can't, exactly. So one of the main problems that I see on my tests with students, they give me an answer, but it's not the correct answer because they didn't give me what I asked. Okay? So you have to understand it. First thing out there, it says underline or circle the key action words. Now, what do you think action words are? I gave us an example, but give me some examples of action words that you've seen before on essay exams. Describe something. List.
Tell why.
Tell why something happened or how something is done. Okay? All those are action words. What's the difference if you were asked to compare something? What does that mean? If you were asked to compare something, two things, you actually are telling how they are similar. If I ask you to contrast it, what am I asking you? How they are different. Do you see the difference? So if you had an essay exam that started with compare, and you gave me, Kia, you gave me all the differences, would it be a correct answer? No. So already you messed up because you don't really understand what was asked. So make sure you understand that action word before you begin. So the main thing is to circle those words, make sure you know what they're asking you, and look to see if there's a number of things that they want. If they're asking you for two specific things, should you cover those? Yes. If they only say compare two things and that's it, and they don't give you anything else, then you just cover those two things and that's it. Don't keep rambling about something else. All right, so make sure you look to see what they really want and how much they want. I think one of you said, I think Johnny said it made her nervous because she didn't know where to stop. Well, that's one way you can figure out how you can stop writing, is how much do they really want? Am I comparing just two things, or are they asking me to compare them and contrast them? What are they asking? Okay, the example up here says define and discuss the survey research method and give how many examples? 5, showing how it has been applied. So what are you supposed to do first off? What are your action words? Define and discuss. So the first thing you need need to do is figure out if you know what the definition is. Correct? Then what do you have to do? Discuss it. How is it done? How do you apply it? And then you have to give us, how many examples? 5 specific ways that you can use it. How can it be applied exactly? You got it so far? And on your handout, I've got, do I understand the question? Have I done my planning? Have I planned my answer? Meaning, you already start thinking about, what are they asking me? What do I know? And how am I going to get this down? What do I know? How do I need to form everything? How do I need to structure it? Questions on that? All right. So then you got to figure out, you're still worried about if you'll ramble, so you've got to figure out how am I going to plan my answer. Okay, the first thing you need to do is figure out what you want to say. Is that correct? You know the information. Now what am I going to say? Okay? Then you got to jot down the evidence you have or the reasons or the examples you need to use. Think about if it's in a history class, a lot of times they may ask you for specific dates. They may want to know about a certain person who did something. So make sure you're putting that down. Just jot it down on a little sheet of paper or on the side of your test if you can write on it. And then organize your thoughts. Where it is organized, it's easy to follow, and it flows. Make sure you don't jump around, okay? All right, the key thing, and I put this on your handout, it says, number 3 says, from my first sentence, have I identified what the question is and how I will develop my answer? In other words, from the very beginning when you answer, you should be telling your instructor, I know the answer to this question, and this is what I'm saying. This is how I'm going to develop my answer. I'm going to show you this, but you don't say it that way, but that's what you tell them in that first sentence, okay? And I put up there, the first sentence of your answer is very important because it shows your instructor that you know the material and you also know how to answer the question and you know the details that they've given you to support it, okay? So it shows them that you know the material. All right, and then I said it shows you understand and it shows how you will develop it. In other words, it's just a clear topic sentence. When you write a paper, every paragraph you have has to have what kind of sentence? A topic sentence, right? That topic sentence of that paragraph usually does what? Controls the idea of that paragraph. So that's the same thing of an essay question. Once you figured out the answer and you know how you want to say it, that's your topic sentence. And everything in that answer goes back to that topic sentence and relates back to it. So it's very similar to how you write papers. You're just answering one question. All right, the next thing is the main points. Okay, number 4 on your handout says, do the major points stand out? And are the major points supported with what? Evidence. What is evidence? Examples, reasons, okay? So you've already written your topic sentence or your thesis statement to answer that question on your essay exam. Now you're going to give me what? Examples to back up that thesis, okay? Stick to what you have learned. A lot of times, students do something, what you guys guess, they do something and it takes them off track and it's not what the instructor wants. Guess what they do? They don't stick to the facts. What do they start doing? Giving their opinion. If I didn't ask you for your opinion, should you give it? No. Because especially like the example I gave you about the research method, I'm not asking you how you use it. I'm asking, we've covered in class 5 ways to use it. I want to know those 5 ways from our textbook and what we've discussed. Not if you've used them outside of class. Do you see the difference? And a lot of times you lose points and you don't do as well because you put in your opinion and you don't put in what they're asking you, which is the facts behind it. Okay? So make sure you stick to what you've learned, the material you've gone over, and then be logical with your explanation. Okay? Make it very easy to understand. Think about if you were explaining it to someone else. Would they understand what you're saying? You don't have to worry about large grammar and sounding smart and all that. Okay? Just make sure that you get it down and you can understand it. Okay? Questions on any of that? So stick to your points. Should you give your opinion if you're not asked? No. Okay. Now, number 5 says, do I have clear transitions between my major points? What's a transition? Right, when you're talking about one thing and then you shift and you talk about something else. And there should be a clear transition there, not a jump. I call it a choppy jump. Because what that means is you lose your reader because you jump from one idea to the next. Okay? All right, so you've got to use transitions. Make sure that you leave one idea, but you also connect it to the next thing you say. And that you write a what? Conclusion at the very end. At the beginning, what's the first thing I told you you need to do in your first sentence? See how well you're listening. question, and then you give just a brief explanation of how you will proceed, right? Okay? Make sure you have an intro there, okay? That you've introduced that and you let the instructor know that you know the answer. And then what's the main thing after everything's written out? Proofread. Okay. Make sure you proofread. When you write in class, is it harder to proofread than it is to sit at the computer? Yes, why? Sometimes you may think it looks right and it's not, so make sure, and before time, you can think about beforehand, before you come in and get the test, you can think about, if I were asked this, and sometimes you get a study guide, so you can start thinking about, if they ask me this, what would I say? If there is a word that you have a question about, what should you do? Go ahead and look it up and see, or ask if you don't know, but go ahead and look it up and see how to spell it, so when you're sitting there with that test, you don't have to wonder if it's spelled correctly, okay? But go back and proofread, make sure that you can understand it, make sure that your commas and the periods and all that's there, and that your instructor can follow your train of thought. Because you don't want to lose points for not proofreading. All right, so avoid needless errors. Okay, 6 says, did I answer the question? 7 said, did I conclude correctly with a summary? And 8 is, did I proofread? So the main thing is, if you fail to follow the instructions, what happens? You don't do well, okay? So what did we say at the very beginning? What's the first thing you need to do? If you read that essay question, what do you need to start circling or underlining from the very beginning? Action words. You need to know what's being asked of you. Because if you don't follow the instructions, if they ask for 3 examples and you give 1, have you lost major points? Yes, you have, okay? Failing to answer the question that I've asked you, make sure you read the question and you understand it. Don't drift off and answer something else, or try to relate it to something else if that's not what you're being asked. Okay? The other thing is running out of time. How many of you take an essay exam and you find yourself running out of time? Why does that happen to you? Right. When you start planning it though, if you get the test and you look at it, you've circled your action words and you know the answer and you sort of know what you want to say, how should you start organizing things? Should you start writing things out longhand? No. What do you need to do? Just bullet things. Start bulleting your main ideas in order that you could follow them. Or if you just start thinking and you just bullet, then number them the way they should go so that you can follow that order and so that it'll keep you on track. You need to have something to sort of guide you, because if you don't, then you have danger of doing what? Drifting. You don't want to drift, okay? Using only personal experience, we talked about that. If they don't ask you for personal experience, and a lot of times, essay exams, we don't want personal experience, do we? They just want to know if you understand the material, if you've mastered it, okay? And writing a lot and not saying what? Much. What does that mean? You wrote a whole paper on this question on number 1, and you still got 2 and 3 to go, and you didn't even answer number 1. Okay? So make sure you start with your action words, you know what's being asked of you, plan out what you want to write really quickly as you sit there, and think about the order, and go ahead and try to put it down. Think about that first sentence, what you will say, how you will answer it, and how you plan to develop your answer. Okay? Questions on any of that? How many of you have to write a research paper? Oh, that's all right. Sorry, there you go. Everybody should get one. How many of you will have to write a research paper? Or you have written a research paper? Okay, talk to me about that a minute. What's difficult about writing a research paper? What's difficult?
Reading it,
Reading it, what do you mean?
by researching what's needed to be stated.
Right. Evidence, facts to back up what you want to say. What else?
Sometimes I come across different where they're not saying the same.
Right.
thing that
And you have,
others
you have evidence that doesn't match up.
Right.
Contradictory opinion. Okay. What else? You said the topic. Right, because because there's two different types of topics you can have. Now, if you take my 112, what kind of topic will I want you to have? Some of you have taken it, so you want to know this. It should be an argument, Johnny. Now, what does that mean?
Where you got different ones that there's a statement and you got to prove every which way you want to go,
Right.
all the facts.
You have to take a stand on one way or the other, okay? Give me an example of an argumentative topic. Okay, that's broad. Kit Kat versus Snickers. Okay, she's taking that one. Okay. If you're trying to tell me what's better than the other, and your argument is that Kit Kat is better, then you have to go about proving that, correct? So you have to take one side, you have to take a stand. What are the other types of topics? If it's not argumentative, it's just a research topic, right? Give me an example.
George Washington.
Could be George Washington. Somebody give me another. Something else you've researched. It could be about your major, researching your major, and finding out, you know, how much you would make, how much education you would have to have, where jobs are, that kind of thing. So that would be research. What did you say? That's what you've been doing, okay? So you know about that. So there are several different types of topics. First step is to figure out, what does your instructor want? Are they wanting you to have an argumentative research topic, or are they asking you just to research a topic that you are interested in? There's a big difference, okay? So you gotta make sure you know. All right, first place to start is your purpose. What's your purpose of anything? It's to tell why you're doing something, what you're writing about. I call it the goal of whatever you do, okay? All right, everything you write should have a purpose. To explain something, to inform us about something. In my class, a lot of times, it's to persuade, because you feel like your stance on something is correct and you want to persuade me to believe the way you do, okay? But everything you write should have a purpose. If you don't have a strong purpose for it, should you do it? No, because that's your goal for doing anything that you do. Sometimes will you have more than one purpose? Could it be to inform and also to persuade? Sure, okay? So sometimes you can have more than one purpose. Okay. All right, and there we go. Sometimes to write it in one word. All right, audience. Who's the audience of your paper when you write a paper? Whoever is listening or whoever is reading. But give me a specific audience. Right, you have to pinpoint exactly. I call the audience your target group of people. A lot of times in your classes, your audience will be, who's your audience? Your instructor and your peers, exactly. That will be your audience. So you have to take into consideration, are they well informed? Are they generally informed? Are they not informed at all? Does that matter?
Yes.
Yes, because sometimes if they're well informed, you need to skip basic information on it and jump right into advanced material. But if they're not informed at all about what you're writing, you have to start with what? The basics. Okay, you have to start with the basic information. Okay, audience does affect your writing. And as a rule, you will want to avoid slang and local dialect. Okay, also, no texting language. Why would you want to do that when you consider your audience? Does everyone understand texting language? No. Does everyone understand some of our slang that we use? No. Okay? So make sure you consider your audience when you write. Will they understand what I'm saying? Always turn in your best work. Okay? Turn in a draft. And don't assume that we know what you're talking about. What does that mean? Explain it well. Because there may be someone reading your paper who has no idea about, what was the example you gave me, George Washington. Something that George Washington did. We may not have any idea, and you may refer to it in one sentence and keep going. So you assume that we knew that, but we may not. So you need to make sure you spell it out and don't assume we know anything, okay? I always tell my students, show me, don't tell me, okay? Because there's a big difference in showing and telling, okay? All right, a little bit more with your audience, okay? Always think about who you're reaching, who you want to reach. If it's an argumentative topic, a lot of times, you're trying to reach people who may not agree with you. So how should you come across to those people? Should you be offensive? No. How should you come across if you're trying to convince them?
Kind of lean on their topic.
Right, it could be, I understand where you're coming from. It's just like if you're talking to somebody and you say, well, I understand where you're coming from, but I have strong conviction about this because, and you explain it. So you make sure it's kind of meeting in the middle, is what I call it. You let them know you understand where they're coming from, but you also let them know that you have strong conviction about the way you feel. All right. All right, be aware of the audience's background. Again, we talked about, are they informed? Are they well informed? Are they not? What kind of education and background do they have? And think about anything else that may, you know, have an effect on what they would understand or what they would know about the topic. Questions on that, your audience? All right. And I like to think of these. What does the audience already know? Okay. And what's a good way if you're in a class to find that out? Ask. Could you ask your classmates? Sure. And they would tell you, I have no idea what you're talking about. Or, oh yeah, I saw that on the news the other day. So find out what they know. Find out what their opinion is on it. Okay? And what do they need from you? They need to know that you've researched the topic, that you know it well, and that you've used sources the correct way, that you've documented, that you have not plagiarized. When you paraphrase, they want to know that you took it from someone else and put it in your own words, but you still cited that original source, correct? All right. So you have to think about your assignment, okay? The first place I like to start is to tell students, choose a subject that strongly interests you. Because if it's not interesting to you, will it be to your audience? No. Will we know that you are not invested, that you do not care, that you are bored? Yes, we will. Okay? Make sure you narrow the topic, broad versus specific. You said abortion a while ago, right? Why is that broad? Because where are you going with that? I mean, you could talk for days about that topic, correct? So you need to narrow that down. And I gave you an example. If you come to me and say, and it's not an argumentative topic, it's just something you want to research. I'm interested in alcoholism. Really? How long is this paper? 8 pages. You could go on for 28 pages, okay, or longer. So you need to make sure it's very specific. So I narrowed it down. Do beer commercials on TV contribute to alcoholism? Could you go and find information to support that? Or could you try to find evidence? Could you research it? Could you find articles? Could you find websites? Sure you could, okay? And you would have to take a stand to begin with. You would have to know if you believe it does or it doesn't. If you think it does contribute or it doesn't. Okay? Research your subject and always go back to whom? And check for guidelines. Your instructor. Always make sure you're researching the correct way, that you're finding the sources you need to find, that everything is acceptable. And every instructor is different, so make sure you ask. All right, stance. That's purpose and audience. And genre, that could mean a narrative essay. That means it could be an art essay. It's just all different kinds of things, depending on what class, what subject you're working with. Okay. And I gave you some examples here. Okay, what's the difference in a lab report and an autobiographical essay? What's the difference there? Tell me the difference in the two. If you had to write a lab report versus an autobiographical essay.
Lab report is step by step.
Yes. More scientific. Okay. Probably APA guidelines. We're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. What about autobiographical? That's about yourself, especially if you're in English 111 and I tell you to write a narrative. That means autobiographical. It's about you, something you've lived through, something you've done that you want to share with someone, or that you feel comfortable sharing. Okay? So there's a difference there. Notice if your assignment was to write a lab report. That would be totally different from writing a personal essay, wouldn't it? So make sure you know, would the stance matter? Would it be different in a lab report versus a narrative essay? Your stance in your paper. It would be, wouldn't it? Because in the narrative or the personal essay, it would be more personal, okay? It wouldn't be as scientific, it wouldn't be as research-based as your lab report. Your lab report would rely solely on facts and research and a lot to do with, statistics and things that you found, right? So there's a difference there. Tell me about the difference in describing a Friday night with your friends. What's the difference in that and then arguing in favor of stem cell research for heart patients? What's the difference in the two? Which one's more laid back? The Friday night. Your stance is different there, isn't it? Okay. What about arguing in favor of stem cell research? How would that be different from describing your Friday night?
So that's very complicated.
That's more complicated. It's a more complex topic. You would have to go and find what? Research, information to back up how you feel. Okay. Trying to prove what? That we do need stem cell research for heart patients. That's beneficial to them, that it can help them in a number of ways. Okay? So that's why I want to show you the difference in your stance. It totally depends on if it's formal or informal. Obviously, it's more informal if you're describing Friday night versus arguing in favor of stem cell research. Okay? All right. So sources. Let's think about what you use. Okay. When you write a research paper, what kind of sources do you normally use? The internet. Okay. Is everything credible and believable on the internet? No. Okay. I love the State Farm commercial. You know the one I'm talking about. And the guy comes up and says, no, the girl's coming out, and her friend comes up and she says, where are you going? And she said, I'm going on a date. I have a date with a French model. And he said, really? Where did you meet this guy? And he says, on the internet. And the guy walks up and says, and he is not a French model. Okay. So it shows you that we can't believe everything we see and hear on the internet. You got it. Okay, so what do? When you're looking on the internet, you go to Google or a search engine and you type in a topic and everything pops up. Is the first thing that pops up what you want to use? No. Why?
Because possibly it could be someone else's opinion.
It could be, and it could be an ad for something. It could be wanting you to buy a paper, which is plagiarism, and you don't want to do that. So you have to look through those sources. What do you look for specifically to make sure it's credible? Author? A revised date or an update if it's, if it's been updated on the bottom. Usually you scroll down to the bottom of the page and you can find that. A copyright date is very important. If you cannot find a copyright date and a revised date and a contact us button, do not use it. Why? Because if you can't contact who's responsible for posting that information, you don't want it, because someone somewhere doesn't want you to be able to find out who they are. Second thing, you need to make sure that it's updated on a regular basis. Sometimes on the internet you will not find an author. Depends on where you search and what websites you use. But just be very clear that if you can't find that information, you do not want to use it. What about, I'm jumping ahead, but what about Wikipedia?
No.
Why?
Everybody.
Because it's a wiki, and what can people do to wikis?
Whatever it is.
Anybody can go to a wiki and update it, can add information. Does it always have to be true? No. So don't use Wikipedia. All right. So you have to evaluate websites that you use based on, not the authorship, that's whoever's taken ownership of what's been written, who's published the information, if it's accurate, if it's reliable, if it's current. And I always use this example. I had a student one time who wrote a paper on the Holocaust, and she researched it and did a lot of research, I thought, and she came to me and she used a source and she quoted it. And I read the paper and I went back to her and I said, did you read this source that you cited in this paper? And she said, I did, and I loved it. I said, really? Because it says the Holocaust never happened. But you read it and you love it. Do you see how we fall for anything sometimes? So be very careful about what you find and what you use. Make sure you've read it and you know what it says. Please don't pick the first thing that pops up and use it because you think it's credible. Okay? NC Live, I love, and it's connected to our library webpage. It's credible, it's archived from journals and scholarly magazines and scholarly newspapers, and you always have an author and you always have a copyright date, and it's updated all the time. That's a great source to use. So if you go to the library webpage, you can find NC Live. Okay? Use that. It's a very good source. Avoid plagiarism. How do you do that? Always cite what you use. What's the difference in quoting word for word and paraphrasing? Okay, if you quote, you've taken it directly from the source. That means word for word, and you put it in quotation marks. If you paraphrase, what's the difference? You've read something, you've reworded it, and it did not come from you originally. Do you still have to cite that source if you paraphrase? Yes, you do. Always. You can't read it and reword it and think that it is wrong, because it's not. You got the original idea from someone else who had already written it, so make sure that you cite it. All right, I gave you a handout that says APA and MLA. And I know some of you take Mr. Presser and some of you have Miss Maitland for psychology. And they probably, I think Mr. Presser uses Chicago style, is that true? I think it's his formatting style. Lindsay uses APA and I use MLA. And I wanted to show you the difference in APA and MLA. So I gave this to you. It will always help you. And I'll tell you another website that's really good. And I did not put it up here, but it's the Purdue OWL website. Is very good, and it shows you the difference in different citations and how you do Chicago style, APA, and MLA. But APA, and I have it up here, it stands for the American Psychological Association. You use it a lot in social sciences like psychology, sociology, all that, geography. MLA is more humanities, and that's my area with English, and that's what you use. And I showed you down below with the bullet points the similarities between the two, and how you cite things with parenthetical citations and that kind of thing. And then on the back, I gave you some examples of the difference in MLA and APA so that you would have that. And I gave you 2 samples on the very last page. So keep that with you. That way, if you ever want to know how to cite it, you'll have that. But also go online and look at the Purdue OWL website, and they do a really good job of showing you how to do that as well. Okay. Questions on finding sources in a research paper, how you cite in, anything with that? Okay, so then you have to shape your essay. What is your general subject? You've narrowed it down, you know what your purpose is, and then you come up with a working thesis, and you're still considering who? Your audience, okay? So your working thesis, what should it say? It's your main idea, but it should be your stand on something, correct? If it's an argument, right? If you're arguing for something, it's how you feel about it, your stance on it. All right. Think about if you have enough information, if you can, and for me it's if you can argue the topic, because that's my assignment I use. Do you have enough research that will help you support what you're saying? And you have a variety of types. Have you used just NC Live, or did you use an interview with somebody and a website and some things from NC Live? Is it good to have a variety? Why? Well, it helps us as the instructor to see. If I'm looking at it, it helps me to see that you've actually looked in several places to see what is out there. Okay. So it shows us that you're trying to do a well-rounded argument. Okay. So you gotta have an introduction, state your thesis, okay, or your claim, give your reasons, provide your evidence for your proof, and then if it is an argument, if you are trying to argue for or against something, make sure you consider the opposition, okay, and then conclude. All right, talk to me just a minute about thesis in your research paper. What should a thesis do? It is your main idea, but it should tell us what the whole paper is about, right? And I tell most of my students, if you don't have a thesis, you don't really have a controlling idea of your paper. You don't have a well-written paper. Why? Right, we don't really know what direction you're going. We can't follow you. I don't even know how you know, what your take is on that. I don't even know where you're taking it. I always say it's kind of your roadmap. What are you going to tell me where you're taking it? And if you think about, and it's very important, even in a research paper, because that door back there has a hinge. What's the purpose of that hinge? Right, and it keeps it up, doesn't it? Okay? If it didn't have a hinge, what would happen to the door? It would fall. Just like your essay will fail if you don't have a thesis statement. You've got to have a thesis to control all your ideas. I always say it makes a point and it takes a stand. No matter what it is, no matter what subject you have, make a point about it and take a stand on it. That's your thesis statement. Once you've done that, then everything else kind of falls into place. You can figure out what you want to say, what evidence you want to look up, what reasons you have to support it. Okay? Any questions about anything right now? All right. Look at your APA and your MLA handout and just see if you have any questions about it. Just flip over. I did put something in there about short quotations, works cited, how you do your references. They should be on a separate page. They do look different. I don't that they're different as far as the look. If you look at APA and you look at MLA, very different. Okay. Any questions on that? Do you think you can write a research paper now? You feel a little more confident? Why?
I was already kind of confident.
Okay.
Just came to brush it.
That's right, and it's nice to have, you know, a plan. What about essay exams? You feel a little bit better about essay exams? That's right. I always try to plan, always important to plan. Even though you may only have a few seconds to plan, you know what, you know you studied, you know the information, you know what you can recall, so we'll jot it down.
They actually helped me with word problems, math wise. Because usually you see a math problem, a word problem, you're already like, I don't know where to start.
Right, and you already have a fear. That's what I was gonna say earlier. Once if you take an essay exam, you already have a fear because you see you've got to do all that in 50 minutes, you know, and you already have a fear. So some of that will help you plan some of your answers and try to organize your thoughts a little bit better. Yes.
I'm not seeing it, it might be in here. but,
Okay.
Whenever we do the citations and things.
Yes, ma'am.
Where it says medium,
Right. That is, it depends on if it's a newspaper or if it's a magazine.
is there always supposed to be something there?
No, there does not have to be. No. And now MLA, I don't know about APA, but MLA changed where at the end of every citation now, if it's print or online, you put print or web. If you found it online, it would be web. If you found it as a print book or a print journal, it would be print. Used to, you wrote the URL for a website, but now they don't want you to write all that out, so they just do web at the end of it. That's a good question. Anything, any questions about anything? Either or, research papers or essay exams? Thank you. Oh, one question, I have one, I think.
I have a question.
Okay.
Not so much of the writing aspect.
Yes, ma'am.
More so on the delivery.
Okay.
When you have to present a thesis statement or research paper in front of class, in front of an audience.
Mhm.
What are some key pointers that you can give someone who's in the process of doing a research paper?
For the presentation part?
Yes.
It depends on, the first place I would start is to ask your instructor, what do they want you to give? Because usually you don't have time to recap your whole paper. With my students, I give them maybe 3 bullet points and say, this is what we need to know. If you have extra time, you fill it in, but if you don't, this is what you need to tell us. And normally it's what you learned in terms of evidence, of what you found out that you did not know prior, and why you picked the topic is what I asked mine. So it just depends on what your instructor wants, as far as that goes. But try to stay, I mean, you cannot recap that whole paper in a oral presentation. You can't.
And what about, what are your suggestions on nerves? You know, I'm a personal person, I'm a talking person, but when
Do you
it
put your
comes-
BS to let go? Have you ever done that?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. What about pushing down on your chair before you get up?
Yeah.
Try pushing down on the chair. And you can also, you know this, take deep breaths. You know, but don't hold your breath, because you know you pass out, you don't want that. But pressing down a lot on the chair is good. Press down on the chair. A lot of my students do that in communications, because they know they have to get up and speak. So if you can press down on your chair, and that's a big one, clenching your fist, and then letting your arms droop, and just do this number. Just try to get the nervous energy out, you know, just lift your hands. Sometimes that works. But just keep in mind, everybody's nervous. It's not just you, and nobody wants you to fail. So,
But everybody's nerves is different. Like,
It is.
my nerves, I get nervous where my words want to jump up together. So it's,
just
that's
take
why-
a deep breath, and a lot of times students think once they get up there, they've got to start. Just take a minute. Breathe a minute. Maybe hold on to the side for a second and let go. Hold on and let go. Hold on and let go. But don't hold on to it where they can see the whites of your knuckles. Just hold on and let go. And it will be better. And once you get into what you're saying, probably about 60 seconds, that's what research says. Usually, your nerves subside.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, well, let's give her a round of applause. I want to thank her for presenting for our workshop today. Just as a reminder, make sure you have your little handout so you can attend some of the other workshops that we have.
One other thing you may want to add is our college transfer day. You might have received an email on that. That is Thursday, November 6th from 8:30 to 10. There's several colleges and universities that will be in the Commons area. We have a lot of this posted up down our hallway or on our bulletin board. Some have them on our doors, things like that. So if you have any questions on that, we can help remind you. Okay, well, thank you all for coming today. We appreciate it. For the students that actually sign and your name is on this, just see me before you leave, okay? All right, thank you.